South Korea's K1 main battle tank has been a familiar presence on the Korean Peninsula for more than 4 decades. Designed during the Cold War and shaped by the immediate threat posed by North Korea, the K1 was never intended to be a glamorous symbol of cutting-edge technology. Instead, it was built to be reliable, numerous, and ready for a high-intensity ground conflict at short notice. In recent years, Seoul has completed the K1A2 upgrade program, officially bringing the fleet into the digital age. The critical question now is not whether the K1A2 works, but whether it is enough for the strategic environment South Korea faces today. For Australian audiences, this question resonates strongly. Australia, like South Korea, must balance a limited defense budget against rising technological demands, while maintaining credible land forces in an increasingly contested region. The story of the K1A2 is therefore not just about one country's tank fleet, but about how middle powers manage aging platforms under modern strategic pressure. Today, the K1 series remains the backbone of the Republic of Korea Army's armored force. While the K2 Black Panther has drawn international attention for its advanced fire control, sensors, and mobility, it exists alongside a much larger number of K1 variants. This mix reflects a deliberate force structure choice. South Korea prioritizes readiness and mass as much as technological superiority. The K1A2, in this context, is not expected to dominate the battlefield alone. Its role is to provide depth, resilience, and continuous armored presence across key defensive sectors, particularly along the northern approaches. The K1A2 upgrade represents a pragmatic attempt to extend the relevance of an older platform. The most important improvements are not in raw firepower or armor thickness, but in digital integration. The tank now benefits from modernized command and control systems, digital mapping, and improved internal data sharing between crew members. These changes allow K1A2 units to operate more effectively within combined arms formations, sharing situational awareness with infantry, artillery, and higher headquarters. For modern warfare, this networked capability matters more than incremental increases in gun caliber or engine output. Another area of improvement is situational awareness. Enhanced cameras and monitoring systems reduce blind spots and improve safety and responsiveness in complex terrain. This is particularly relevant given the Korean Peninsula's mixture of urban areas, mountains, and narrow movement corridors. From an Australian perspective, this focus on awareness, rather than sheer armor, aligns with broader Western trends, where survivability increasingly depends on seeing the threat first and coordinating responses across domains. However, the limitations of the K1A2 remain clear, and they are not easily solved through incremental upgrades. One of the most significant issues is survivability against modern anti-tank threats. The tank lacks an integrated active protection system comparable to those found on newer main battle tanks. In an environment saturated with advanced anti-tank guided missiles and armed drones, this gap cannot be ignored. While South Korea mitigates this weakness through layered air defense, artillery suppression, and electronic warfare, the tank itself remains vulnerable in isolation. Equally important, and often overlooked in purely technical discussions, are the human factors. Reports about extreme internal temperatures during operations have highlighted the strain placed on crews. For a country with a conscription-based military, and a society highly attentive to soldier welfare, this issue carries political and social weight. Operational effectiveness is not only about armor and sensors, it is also about the endurance and concentration of the crew inside the vehicle. Australian defense planners, who increasingly emphasize human performance and sustainability, will recognize this as a genuine capability concern rather than a minor comfort issue. In a potential conflict scenario on the Korean Peninsula, the K1A2's role would be tightly defined. It is not intended to fight prolonged tank-on-tank duels against the most modern enemy platforms. Instead, it would function as part of a dense defensive system, holding ground, supporting mechanized infantry, and absorbing pressure, while other assets deliver decisive effects. Air power, long-range artillery, rockets, surveillance systems, and unmanned platforms would carry much of the burden of striking enemy concentrations and disrupting command structures. The K1A2 provides mass and persistence, allowing more advanced systems to be used selectively and efficiently. This approach reflects a broader strategic logic that Australian audiences will find familiar. No single platform, however advanced, can dominate modern warfare on its own. Capability emerges from integration. South Korea's continued reliance on the K1A2 demonstrates confidence in its overall military ecosystem rather than in the tank as a standalone solution. The question then arises, why not retire the K1 fleet entirely and replace it with newer tanks? The answer lies in cost, time, and risk. Replacing more than 1,000 main battle tanks with top-tier modern equivalents would impose an enormous financial burden, even for an economy as advanced as South Korea's. It would also create transitional risks, potentially reducing readiness during the shift to a new force structure. By upgrading the K1 to the A2 standard, Seoul buys time and stability, ensuring that armored units remain operationally credible while future systems are developed. This logic mirrors challenges faced by Australia in sustaining its own armored and mechanized forces. Upgrading existing platforms, rather than pursuing rapid wholesale replacement, often provides better value and preserves operational continuity. The K1A2 is a textbook example of controlled life extension as a strategic tool. Looking ahead, it is clear that the K1A2 is not the endpoint of South Korea's armored ambitions. Development work on the next-generation main battle tank concept, often referred to as K3, signals a long-term vision that embraces artificial intelligence, advanced sensors, and potentially new gun calibers. In this future force, the K1A2 will gradually transition from frontline asset to secondary role, training platform, or reserve capability. Its continued service is therefore best understood as a bridge between eras. From an Australian viewpoint, the most important lesson is not about the technical details of the K1A2, but about strategic discipline. South Korea has chosen a realistic path that aligns military ambition with economic and political constraints. It accepts that the K1A2 is imperfect, yet sufficient for its intended role within a broader system of deterrence and defense. Ultimately, the K1A2 is ready for combat, but it is not designed to define the future of armored warfare. Its value lies in reliability, numbers, and integration, not in cutting-edge innovation. South Korea's strength does not rest on this tank alone, but on its ability to manage force structure intelligently, combine old and new technologies, and prepare methodically for the next generation. For Australia and other middle powers facing similar strategic dilemmas, this balance between pragmatism and ambition may be the most relevant takeaway of all.